Hello and welcome to Deep Search, the complete photography editing workflow by me, Heath Herring. I created this workflow to streamline my editing process and to standardize the look that I apply to every photograph in post-processing. This system has served me well, and I've continued to build upon it, and I think it's at a place now where other people could benefit from it as well. So here we are. This is how I edit photographs. The first thing I'm going to do is take you through an entire edit of one photograph. Everything I would typically do from start to finish. And as you can see, I'm using Adobe Bridge. I also edit my photographs in Camera Raw. Most of you probably use Lightroom. If you're not already familiar with Camera Raw, it's the engine that runs Lightroom. They are exactly the same thing in different packages. This is just a scaled down version of Lightroom, but for all intents and purposes, you can consider this Lightroom. All the adjustments are the same. All of the presets work exactly the same way. It just looks a little different. The first thing I do to every single photograph is set the proper exposure, the white balance, and I adjust the contrast. The next thing I'm going to do is apply a preset. The preset is going to reset the contrast to whatever the preset is designed to do, but I like to preload the contrast just to get an idea of what I'm looking for when selecting a preset. In my opinion, exposure, white balance, and contrast is the majority of post-processing when it comes to most photos. If you can master exposure, white balance, and contrast, you're not going to have any problem producing good photos. So the next thing I do is I select a preset. Hey, real quick, this is Heath from the future here, chiming in on this edit. I just wanted to clarify before we dive into the preset section that you don't have to use my presets in order for this workflow to work for you. You can use any of your own presets or any other presets that you normally use in your own editing workflow. And if that's the case, you can just skip ahead to the part where we go to the basics panel and adjust the preset to the photograph. I just wanted to clarify that because this isn't meant to be a video designed to make people buy my presets. This is just a free editing guide that I wanted to put out into the world to show people how I edit in case that information might be helpful to others in their own editing process. That's all. Back to the video. I think for this photo, I'm going to try some Portra 400. We'll see how that looks. Next thing I do is use the amount slider to decide where I want it to be. I almost always go for 100%, but in many cases, I'll go as low as 30 to 40%, and in some cases, all the way up to 150%. Just depends on the photo. Everything I do is meant to serve the photograph. I'm just gonna go at 100% here. Each one of these preset categories has three options at the bottom to turn off your fading, if there's any fading, turn off the grain if there's any grain applied, and turn off the preset completely. So the next thing I like to do is hover over no preset to see what it looks like with no preset applied, and then move over so you can see what it looks like with the preset applied. Sort of a before and an after. So this no preset, you can click on it and completely reset your preset and go to something else if you want to. Let's try an Origin 84. Really like this one right here. I'm gonna decide how much I want. I like this one at about 100%. Now I'm gonna hover over no preset. So this is without it, and this is with it. Without it, with it. Let's try Kodachrome. So hover over no preset, before, after, before, after. Let's come up to classic, because classic is the flagship preset of my entire workflow. Some are going to be more heavy-handed than others. If you like the look of one and it ends up being a little bit too heavy-handed for your personal taste, remember, use the amount slider. That's what it's here for. All right, we're going to go with 100% on that. Before, after. Just gives it a nice classic film look. The next thing I do with every single photograph after I apply a preset is fine-tune the preset to the photograph in the Basics panel. This is an absolutely necessary step because presets cannot account for all of the individual lighting and shooting conditions and natural contrast that show up in every photograph. So let's see where we're at. I'm going to hover over no preset, preset. Subtle, beautiful. Let's try one more, just for good measure. Let's try something weird. Let's try it to Gray Island. Okay, nice and heavy-handed here. Go for something extreme to give you a good idea of how these work. So, back to the Basics panel to calibrate this thing to our photograph. This is a great opportunity to access the toolbox. I'm going to come down to the toolbox and I'm going to go to Recover Sky. I'm going to click that. I don't want that much, but I want a little bit of that. Now, Recover Sky is going to activate an AI mask. You can come over here and click that AI mask, and you can even fine-tune it. Okay, I'm going to call that good. So the next thing I'm going to do is open this in Photoshop. In Camera Raw, that means clicking Open. If you're in Lightroom, simply right-click your photograph and click Edit in Photoshop. I am going to do one thing before we go over there, though. I'm going to go to Effects, and I'm going to turn the grain all the way down. Another way I could have done that is just come up to any of the preset sections and clicked No Grain. Once we get into Photoshop, you'll see why I did that. The very first thing I do when I get into Photoshop is hit Command-J to create a new layer. We're going to edit on a brand new layer so we're not affecting our original base layer. At this point, I would apply sharpening. I don't usually sharpen my photos, but if I do, I go old school and I use the unsharp mask. Because in my opinion, after all these many decades, it's still the very best way to do it. I think that using unsharp mask looks less like sharpening and more like simply shooting with a sharper lens or nailing better focus. Nice. The reason I apply sharpening first is because the next thing we're going to do is load up one of the film grain overlays included in this workflow. Once I have an overlay open, I'm going to hit Command-A to select it, Command-C to copy it, go back over to my other photograph, and Command-V to drop it in. The next thing I'm going to do is hold Command and select the layer. I'm going to hit Command-T, which will open Free Transform. And we're going to use that to match this layer to this photograph. If you're using Windows, I can't tell you what the quick commands are, but I can tell you that you can go to Edit and then go to Free Transform right here to do that. The beautiful thing about these overlays is this is real grain scanned off of real negatives. So you're literally putting real film grain into your photos. The next thing you do is go over here to the layer mode and select overlay. Now let's see what that looks like. All of this grain is coming from this layer because I turned off the grain before we left Lightroom. So that's before and after. It's a little heavy for me, so I'm going to take it down to about 70%. See what that looks like before and after. I love it. Looks great. Now the next thing that I will do sometimes, definitely not all the time, this is optional, is apply a layer that simulates what's called global halation. And it accounts for what many people refer to as the warmth of film. And here's how I achieve that. I'm going to apply a solid color, and in the hex code, I'm going to enter FF9B5E. This will get you started. You can fine tune this afterwards, depending on the color tones of your particular photograph. This is a good starting point. Hit OK. Go down to the layer mode and select soft light. Right underneath overlay, soft light. We're gonna run this somewhere between 5 and 10%. Let's try 8. I'm really careful with this adjustment because I never want to overdo it. We'll go with that for now. That's more than I would normally do, but I want you to be able to see it. The last thing I do in Photoshop is hit and hold Command, Option, Shift, E. And that condenses everything that we've done into one fresh layer. And I come up to Filter, and I go down to Camera Raw, which is the app that we used to edit the photograph in the first place. We're reopening Camera Raw to do a final fine-tune adjustment on everything. This is all looking way too warm for me right now. In this photograph, I would have never added the halation layer, but I did, so it's going super warm. So for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna keep it and just work it out and show you how I would fine-tune my photo. I'm gonna come down to the color mixer. I'm gonna reduce the orange a bit. I'm gonna boost the blues a little bit. I'm going to boost the luminance of the blues. And I'm just gonna do one more pass at everything. I'm gonna make big sweeps just to see right where I want everything to be at. Now these are quick edits. I would usually spend more time, but we've got a lot to go through, so I'm not gonna waste a lot of time here. Okay, now I'm gonna turn off all of the adjustments we made before that final layer. That way I can toggle the final layer on and off to see what our overall Photoshop adjustments were. To me, it went a little contrasty, so I'm gonna turn these back on and pump this in right up to where we want it to be. Okay, that's everything that I would do to a single photograph. Now I'm gonna jump back into Camera Raw, and we're gonna do a quick edit on a handful of photos so that I can demonstrate these presets to you, show you what they look like, and how they react to a variety of different cameras, lenses, lighting, and shooting conditions. And click Select All. Open in Camera Raw. Again, this is just like opening it in Lightroom. Same thing, slightly different layout. So what we're gonna do now is I'm just gonna select a preset for each of these and do a quick edit. First thing I do, to every photograph, exposure, doesn't need anything, white balance, doesn't need anything, and I'm gonna give it a little contrast to pre-visualize what I'm gonna want out of a preset. I think I'm just gonna go straight to classic on this one. Of course, quick clean edit is gonna work for everything. It's meant to work with any photo. And if it doesn't work with your photo, use the amount slider and it will. But I'm just gonna jump straight to the flagship preset here. Classic AF. Before, after. Just gives it a little bit of that filmic warmth. How much do we want? About 100%. Now I'm just gonna hover over a few other ones and make sure and make sure there's not one that fits it better already. Classic 4 fits it just a little bit better. This is a photograph shot by my friend Michael on a 5D Mark II. The old classic. Okay, 95 to 100, that does it. I'm gonna come down to the toolbox. I'm gonna recover the sky. I don't want it that much. I'm just gonna recover it enough that I can see a little bit of information coming through. Okay, no preset, preset. The next thing I would do is come in here and fine tune in the basics panel. It doesn't need anything. This photo's done in my opinion. just for good measure, we're gonna move around a few sliders. Before and after. That's a done photo. Next photo is also by Michael with a 5D Mark II. With this one, I can already tell I'm in the mood for some Kodak portrait. Just a matter of which one. I'm gonna go with the standard. How much portrait do we want? 90 to 100% looks good here. Now I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna fine tune the image to the preset. Beautiful. All right, let's see. No preset, preset. No preset, preset. Beautiful and done. Moving on. One more photograph by Michael with the 5D Mark II. First thing I'm gonna do, set the exposure, which I did not do in the last photograph. It was just perfect right out of the gate. Michael nailed the white balance and the exposure. It was great. On this one, we're gonna pump up the exposure just a little bit. And I think I'm gonna cool this one off just a touch. Right about there. See where we want this contrast to be is gonna be right around there. Readjust my exposure. Maybe warm it back up just a touch. Not much. Okay. I'm gonna go to Kodachrome for this one. One of the Kodachromes is gonna be perfect for this. I'm liking standard. And if you hear me say standard, that just means version 1. The version 1 of every one of these presets is the standard version. So this is Kodachrome standard. This would be Origin 84 standard, so on and so forth. How much Kodachrome do we want? About 75%. Now, back to the basics. To fine tune. It doesn't really need anything. Now at this point, I would either call this photograph done, or if I were doing a serious edit here, I would come down to the color mixer, saturation, and I'm going to adjust orange to make sure that her skin tone is nice and flattering. I'm just dropping the orange saturation, that's all I'm doing. And I'm just gonna see what this photograph looks like if I adjust the blues and the yellows a little bit. I like taking the blue out of the jacket just a touch. You can see what that's doing whenever I'm really extreme with it. I'm gonna keep the blue pretty low here. I'm just gonna check in on these yellows and make sure, yeah, I wanna drop those just a touch. I think maybe I'll bring the shadows back down just a bit. Before, after. Nice, love it. Now, if those greens are a little too minty for you, you can always choose a different Kodachrome or just a different preset altogether. Because the minty greens are something that's specific to a few of these presets. We could come down to any of the origins and they're gonna be a little bit more true to natural color. I think classic is gonna be somewhere in between. That's why it's classic. See, it works with everything. So if you catch me nerding out on these things, that's because I created all of this just to make my life easier. And now I'm just sharing it with you. Okay, moving on. Next photo. This was shot with a Sony ILCE-1. I don't know what that is. Maybe you do. First thing I'm gonna do, set the exposure. White balance is already solid on this one. Contrast is pretty much already good. I think I'm gonna go for either a classic or a Kodachrome again on this one. Classic 6 looks great. Let's see if a Kodachrome beats it. Hard to say. That's a tie. I'm gonna go for Kodachrome. How much do I want? About 100%. Back to the basics to fine tune it. It's already good, but I'm just moving these around a little bit just to make sure I can't improve upon anything. And we're good. Done photo. Moving on. This photo is going to be a little bit more difficult. There's a lot of blue, a lot of shadow, and a bright skin tone. This is going to take some light and color management. So for a photo like this, really explore the preset pack and find the one that pairs perfectly with the photo. Set our exposure, white balance. We need to warm this one up just a touch. Dial in some contrast. Now, if I wasn't using a preset, and I don't always use a preset, if I wasn't, I would just go highlights down. There's some bright, probably window light hitting her face. I would just recover that a little bit and maybe even soften the contrast a bit. So that's the look we're gonna be going for. I don't even feel like I need a preset at this point, but I'm gonna see if there's anything in the preset pack that can help me improve upon this. I mean, already we're getting some stylization. I really like quick clean edit 2 here. How much of it do we want? About 80-something%. See how the classics work here. I think classic is gonna be a little bit too subdued for this specific variation of blues, warm skin tones, and heavy shadows. But in my opinion, Origin 84 is designed for this very thing. To me, that's giving it sort of an 80s denim kind of vibe. It's got just enough fade and just enough grain to give it the vibe that I'm gonna go for. Just a matter of finding the one that pairs best with this photo. I'm liking version 3. The fade is a little heavy for me, but I'm gonna adjust this until it looks just right. Okay, so this is a perfect opportunity to demonstrate why no fade is a part of this. That's too much fade for me. It's the preset I want to use, but the fade's just too heavy. So I'm gonna come down here to no fade, but I do want some fade. So I'm gonna come down to the toolbox and hover over the fades and see if there's one that gives me a slightly better rendition of what I'm looking for. And here I can adjust the fade intensity individually. There it is. That's what I'm looking for right there. Now back to the basics to fine tune the preset to the photograph. I want some more grain in this one, so I'm going to go down to ISO 800. Looks great. That's probably gonna be a little heavy for most people, but I like it. Just gonna reduce it a little bit. One more time on the basics. Now with this much blue, I would normally pull some of that saturation out, but in this photo, it works. I really like it. So let's see what we've done here. No preset, preset. So subtle. It's just like taking a digital photograph and putting on a subtle layer of 35mm film. I see one last thing I want to do here. I'm gonna drop the blacks just a little bit to give it some punch in the low tones. There we go, done photo. Now something very different. This was taken with the Fujifilm X100F in Oregon. This is one of my photos. This is gonna be easy. Exposure, white balance. I think I'm gonna leave the white balance right where it's at. This is in the evening. I don't wanna make it look like anything but that. Pump in some contrast. Now before I even apply a preset, I'm gonna come down to the toolbox and recover the sky. It's a little heavier than what I want. They usually are. They're designed to be used in conjunction with the amount slider. There we go. Back to the top. Any quick clean is gonna look good on this. I like version 7 especially. I'm gonna go for a little more vibe on this one. There we go. Classic version 3. And I'm gonna want that at about 125%. Looks good. Now back to the basics to calibrate and fine tune. Just gonna make sure that our white balance is right where I want it to be. I'm gonna pump in just a little bit more magenta than I normally would on this one. I want it to feel like it's in the evening. Okay, let's do a before and an after. Before, after, before, after. Subtle, beautiful. Moving on. We've already done this one. But just to cover all our bases, let's give it something else real quick. We'll do a quick edit on it. Origin 84 version 2. Honestly, I would call that done. It's great. I like it. This is a sunset shot, so I would leave all of the orange that's splashing off of those rocks. I like it. This next photo is an interesting one. Normally, when I'm doing portraiture, flattering portraits are the name of the game. But in this case, this is a set portrait of Emile Hirsch in character on the set of a movie called Dig that I shot a couple of years ago. And it's not supposed to be flattering. It's supposed to capture his character, which is a lunatic redneck with a gun that doesn't always like to wear his shirt. I think we pulled it off. Okay, that's exposure, white balance, and contrast. I'm going for some Kodak Portra on this one. Now, one thing to note about some of the Portras is they will brighten your photograph, and you need to fine-tune that in the basics panel. Go for version 4. Now I'm going to reset my exposure because the Portra preset brightened it a little bit too much for my taste. There he is, Emile Hirsch in all of his glory on the set of Dig. One more thing I'm going to take the opportunity to show you here is background recovery in the toolbox. Recover background is a tool that I use when the background is a little bit too bright for my taste. And this one is, but just a little bit. So I'm going to apply it. At 100%, it's too heavy for what I'm looking for. It almost always is. It's designed to be used in conjunction with the amount slider. So I want it at about 30-something%. And from there, again, anytime I do something in the preset section, I fine-tune in the basics panel. This photo is probably a little bright for my taste, but you get the idea. We're doing quick edits here. We are moving on to Thomas Jane, who was the star of the movie Dig. Also known for The Expanse and Punisher and many other things. Exposure, white balance, contrast. Another great opportunity to recover the background. Of course, we don't want nearly that much. I want just a touch of that. That way he stands off of the background. I think almost any of these presets are going to look good on this photo. The lighting was really good in this area. Most of these presets are pretty subtle to begin with. Version 4 looks pretty good right there. Let's try one more just to challenge ourselves a bit here. I think Origin is going to be a little bit too gritty for what I'm looking for in a thing like this. I think Portra would look pretty good here. Yeah, that looks great. That's done. That is a done photograph. But I'm going to push it a little bit further and come down to the film lab and just see if anything in the film lab serves this photo at all. This is my basket of weird presets. I don't hate Portra 400 here. I mean 800. I just don't want that much of it. Again, good and done. Let's see about some of these Superiors. Okay, here we go. Superia 400. Now this one has a tendency to brighten the photograph a bit. So I'm going to come back to the basics panel, readjust it. But again, if I am editing this one for my personal taste, that's going to be Portra 400. And then fine tune. There we go. I love it. Moving on. Soft indoor window lit portrait shot with a Canon 6D. This photo doesn't really need much. We're just going to make it pop a little bit. I think classic is going to work great here. I like it at 100%. Fine tune these adjustments here. I'm going to soften it up just a little. Cool it off just a touch. Subtle edit. No preset. Preset. It's just enough to take it from digital photograph to something that represents classic, timeless film aesthetics. I would probably go for some grain in this one. Let's hop down to the toolbox. But this is one of the photos I would open in Photoshop and put real film grain on, with the overlays that are included in this workflow. Great. Before, after. We'll warm it back up. I think that's my final say on it. Warm it up. Looks great. Moving on. All right, check this out. This is an interesting photo. This was shot with a Canon Rebel. This is a perfect example of why people say that your lens is everything. This is a Canon Rebel here, but it has a 50mm prime on it, and it looks beautiful. Exposure. White balance is pretty good. I think we need a little magenta in here, just to warm up her skin tone. This is also going to be an excellent example of how the Kodachrome color palette works. Great demonstration of the difference between Kodachrome and digital. A pretty heavy example, but you can just dial it in to wherever you want it to be. I would call that done. I'm just going to check on a few things here to see if maybe there's a Kodachrome that pairs a little better with this. I'm gonna go with 4. I'm gonna reduce the contrast and call it done. That's beautiful. Moving on. This looks like something that could have been done in National Geographic, and I told you before that golden era photojournalism is kind of what shaped my idea of beautiful photography, which is what I shaped classic AF around. So this should be a perfect pairing. It's like instant Kodachrome. That's instant National Geographic, Time Magazine, Life Magazine Kodachrome. It's good. Great, moving on. This is a portrait I shot of Margot Price, my favorite country singer, at the Trans-Pecos Music Festival in Marfa, Texas. This photo doesn't need much. We're going to see what we can do with the presets. And we're going to have to be careful because that's a lot of pink, so we're going to have to find a preset that complements that. Any of the quick clean edits are going to be great here. I do want to point out that there are 4 quick clean edits that are sort of like special editions, I guess you could say. All of the quick cleans are fairly neutral in that they don't have any grain, fading, or color grading, except for analog film, Analog Film 2. And the next 2 special presets in this batch are MK2 and MK2 Plus. And what this is my quick clean edit blended with the color palette that you can get from a Canon 5D Mark II. So consider it a Canon 5D Mark II simulation, basically. And that's what I'm going for with this photo. It's bringing out the pink without overstating it. It's making sure that this shadow stays nice and intact. Okay. No preset, preset. So easy. I'm not even gonna bother fine-tuning that one. Okay, maybe a bridal picture on the beach. And for that, I think any of the classics will do pretty well. But I want, yeah, I like that. I like that quite a bit. But I want to go for an overtly specific film stock here. I'm either gonna go for a Superior or a Portra, I think. I want you to just pay attention to what's happening with the skin tones here when I dial up the Portra. It's the color you expect to see from Kodak Portra. So how much do we want? About 120%. Now to fine tune. Okay, no preset. Preset. Great. Love it. Moving on. Pendleton Roundup, Pendleton, Oregon. This was in 2019. Fujifilm X-T3 with an 18-55 kit lens. Exposure is already where I want it to be. I could use a little more contrast. White balance is already good. We just need to come over here, hover over the presets and scan down until we find the one that pairs the best with it. I like that. Let's see if we can beat it. That's where I'm at. Classic version 6. How much classic version 6 do we want? About 100%. Now at this point, I could go down to the tools and select some grain, but I'm going to show you how I do grain manually. In almost every photo, while we're here, I'll show you. In almost every photo, I reduce the clarity down somewhere between -10, -15. You have to be careful though. Once you get past 10 or 12, it can look a little funny. All this is going to do is knock off the harsh edges that might stand out in digital photos. Now with grain, I'm usually less concerned with how much and more concerned with how big. I want to be able to see the grain even if it's faint. And I do that by making it large. But do keep in mind that when you do that, you are literally lowering the perceivable resolution of your photo. So if you want a nice crispy photo, keep the size of it down. You can go wild with the amount if you want and it'll stay sharp. But if you want to soften the photo, bring the size of the grain up. And I'm doing it just enough so it kind of blurs the photo a little bit. It's an unpopular opinion, but I like a slightly soft photograph. In some cases, not all the time. That's done. I like it. Moving on. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pull down the shadows just a bit, just to give it a little bit more mood. Okay, now, moving on. Another one with the Sony A7R Mark IV. This one is going to need some light management, because we're losing information here, and not in a cool way. Sometimes losing information is fine. You don't have to bring back every single highlight that blows out, but in this case, I don't really like what's happening. Quick cleans are going to work just fine here. I'm sure the classics will too, but I'm going to go straight to Kodachrome because I'm going to make a stylistic choice for those green tones in the foliage. That's 75%. No preset. Preset. It's exactly what I'm looking for in a photo. Now, to bring back those highlights, I'm going to select person. I'm going to go straight to close and click create. This is going to create a mask just for the clothing. Bring the highlights down. Not too much, just to where we're not blowing out those highlights. And we're good. Before, after. That's what one of my photos looks like right there. Even though I didn't take this one. I did take this one though. Pendleton, Oregon at the Hotel de Cowpunch. It's a cowboy bunkhouse. White balance is already good. I want some Portra 400 on this one. That's perfect in my opinion. I like that. That's exactly what I'm looking for, but I am going to go ahead and choose one of these other ones that are a little bit more involved to work with because they brighten the photo. But they brighten the photo because that preset is meant to be used in conjunction with calibrating your exposure. It wouldn't look the same otherwise. Might seem counterintuitive, but trust me, it works. That's great. I like it. No preset, preset, no preset, preset. Looks like I took a picture with a 35mm film camera and a roll of Portra 400. All right, bridal portraits. This was taken with a Nikon D4. Might just make sure there's not too much green in there. I don't want to warm it up too much. I'm gonna call that good. I'm gonna go straight to classic version 1, decide how much of it I want. No preset, preset, no preset, preset. I think this is also a good candidate for selecting the close and bringing down the highlights there. So we go over here, we select person, only clothing. Create. Highlights down. And if the highlights down doesn't quite do the trick, if you're having to take it down so far that it starts to look muted or dirty, use it in conjunction with slightly lowering the exposure on the clothing. Let's see a few more presets. I really like Kodachrome 1 here. That's great, I like that. No preset, preset. So check it out, if we started over with this one, all you would have to do is set your exposure, select Kodachrome 1, decide on the amount that you want, fine tune a little bit, and you've got a done photograph. If you want to bring the highlights back in the dress, go for it, but it's absolutely not necessary. Before, after, before, after. Moving on. This was taken with a Sony a7R Mark III, 35mm lens, 1.8. Need to brighten this one up a little. Now this photo is going to require one major critical fix. And that's contrast. It's going to need a lot of contrast. It's going to need more contrast than probably any of these presets are going to offer. But we'll see. Some of them are devoted just to contrast, and we'll see if it's enough. All of these vibes are exactly what I want to go for. There's just not enough contrast. Even the one designated classic AF contrast doesn't have enough contrast for this photo. Okay, so in a case like this, you've just got to pre-visualize what you're gonna do when you're fine-tuning it. I know that what I want is the classic look on this one. But the preset is not going to give me what I need in terms of the special attention that this photograph requires. So we come back into the basics panel, we fine-tune it. The first thing I'm gonna do is pump in the contrast. Okay, and when I do that, I'm starting to see that we're getting too bright in the bright areas. So, fine-tune the exposure, fine-tune the contrast, fine-tune the exposure, fine-tune the contrast. All of these adjustments affect one another. Bring down the highlights finally. There you go. Before, after, before, after. Now another thing that you could do with this one if you really wanted to, continue to dial it in, is do a background recovery. This is a subtle one. It's a subtle background recovery. I like it. I think it serves the photo well. Moving on. Beautiful high-key studio portrait. I think classic 1 is going to be great here. Let's see if any of the other classics just seem to pair a little better with it. If you select a preset and you want to compare it directly to another preset, just come over to the side, hover over the next preset. That way you can compare them back to back. Now the reason for the variations here is most of them make only very subtle changes, but most of those changes are dedicated to skin tones. It's not only skin tones, but it's dedicated to fine-tuning the adjustments to a variety of different conditions, and skin tones are a large part of that. I kind of like version 4. It's a little heavy, but I like version 4 a little bit more than version 1. And for demonstration purposes, I'm going to see how well we can make those pair up. Okay. No preset. Preset. No preset. Preset. Let's try a few more. We're down to our last 2 photographs, so let's try a few more things. I have not touched on Portland 400. Okay, I really like that. When you get down to Portland 400 and to Gray Island, those are based on expired films, so they're going to be a little bit more stylistic. Don't sleep on these. They're not gonna work for every photo, but when they work, nothing else in the preset pack really compares. That's exactly what I would look for in a photograph. Okay. One more studio image. This one is a little bit more of a hard contrast. Soften up the contrast a bit. Okay. Quick cleans are gonna look good, but since this is a really specific lighting condition, you're gonna have to be careful with the amount. Classic looks great here. It's a very subtle edit, but no preset, preset. I'm gonna try just a couple more things real quick. I think that Origin 84 would work really well with this photo. I like everything about that. Classic 35mm film. That's where I would go with that. Okay, last photo. Exposure, contrast, white balance is already good. I know National Geographic has featured this place, I think maybe even more than once. Either way, it's the perfect backdrop to demonstrate something that somewhat is based on Kodachrome. So let's go up to classic. We're gonna need a punchy one. There we go, version 6. Now let's see if Kodachrome is any better. Kodachrome 4, that's what I'm feeling. Let's see if anything else gives us a better result. The whole idea is just to scan down until you see what you're looking for. Nope. There we go. Kodachrome version 4. Now we're gonna fine tune it. Not that it really needs anything at this point. All right, let's see what we got. Before, after. Without a preset, Kodachrome version 4. No preset, Kodachrome 4. It's all you need. It's all I need. Everything I need for editing is inside of this workflow. I don't know how well it's gonna work for you, but I've been a full-time photographer for, 12 years now? And this is the accumulation of all of my editing knowledge in one place. If you take the time to learn this workflow, I promise it's gonna work well for you. Now, before we wrap it up, let's see if there's anything in the preset pack that we didn't touch on. We did quick clean edits. I'll show you how those land on a few random photos. Just to show you that the quick clean edits literally work on everything. They look good on everything. They're just designed to be versatile. Now, one thing you could do if you're feeling like, oh, it's good, but it needs a little bit more, just ask yourself, what does it need? In this case, it just needs more color. There you go. See what else we haven't touched on much. We didn't do much with the film lab. The film lab contains more experimental versions of everything. Let's find a fairly neutral photo. Let's check out one of Michael's photos. Let's go with this picture of Brandy there. Into the film lab, Superia. It looks great, just looks like Fuji Superia. This is a stronger version of Superia, which represents more of like the later years of Fuji Superia, what you would have gotten up until probably just last year. They've changed the formulation now. If you buy Fujifilm from a typical pharmacy, you're actually getting repackaged Kodak film, which is fine, but you're not gonna get this look anymore. This is discontinued forever. Let me show you some of these. These are weird. This is just a lo-fi look. Now right off the bat, you might be thinking, what's the point? Why would I want to just destroy a photo? Remember the amount slider. This is very sharp. It's a little crunchy simply because it's a digital camera. %, of Holga 135 BC, which is a camera that I use from time to time. It's a little plastic Lomo style camera. It's just a soft look. Kodak Ultramax is a pretty heavy-handed edit, but it looks like what it says it looks like. I would lower the contrast. I would probably even lower the saturation of this one for this particular photo. Okay, let's do a few more things. Let me show you what the black and whites look like. T-Max looks best on this photo. So that's black and white. Let's see what black and white does to a soft portrait. That's a done edit. Always be sure to scan down through and see if maybe one of the additional presets serves your photo better than the one that you selected. I like it at about 80-something%. I see some Pendleton Roundup in black and white. Let's check it out. I'm gonna go with this one. I'm gonna bring the highlights down to calibrate it. And I'm gonna bring the shadows down to keep that mood. That looks good. One more. This is one of the Bronc riders who actually rode in Pendleton Roundup in 2018, I believe. We were both staying at the same bunkhouse. And he was kind enough to let me take his portrait. These are all very film-like, so they can sometimes be less punchy than what I'm looking for. So in this case, hard to go wrong with Arista EDU. I like it. I'm gonna do one more pass at Michael's photo here because I love it so much. I could edit this photo over and over and over and never get tired of it. What an amazing photographer. I want to see what this one looks like with some Kodak Portra or Kodachrome. Kodachrome basically looks like what we'd already done to it, so let's check out Portra. Now remember, sometimes you're going to need more contrast than what the preset gives you. These presets are meant to be subtle and smooth. So look for the color and the tonality that you like. And then you can fine-tune it from there. How much do we want? Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip back to the standard version. About 100%. Punch in the contrast just a bit. Bring those highlights down just a touch. So there you go. That's everything. That's going to do it. That's everything that I do to edit my photographs. I hope this workflow brings as much value to your editing process as it has to mine. I appreciate you checking it out. This definitely isn't the final word on this thing. I plan to update it at least a few times this year. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll see where it goes from here. Feel free to reach out with any thoughts or questions you might have in the meantime. Enjoy the workflow, enjoy the presets, and I'll catch up with you on the next one.